Good evening, everybody. My name is Gadi Levy. I'm the director of the Streicker Center. It's always a pleasure to introduce program, especially with so many people in the audience. We really appreciate you joining us. Before we begin, I would like to attention for 3 minutes and 12 seconds. Please take a look.
I love you. I love you. It's going to be fine for you. You need to fake that.
Breaking news. You might say heartbreaking news. A heartbreaking day in Florida, and sadly an all too familiar one.
The devastating shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas not only triggered profound grief, it ignited outrage.
You don't ever have to fear of getting shot in your own classroom. You don't ever have to wonder if you have to see your best friend die next to you. You don't ever have to worry about going into a Holocaust history class to learn about death and then experience it right before your eyes. Enough is enough!
And that anger sparked a national movement.
To the leaders, skeptics, and cynics who told us to sit down and stay silent, wait your turn. Welcome to the revolution.
The Temple Emmanuel Streicker Center invites you to hear the eloquent voices of 8 of these extraordinary young survivors.
We refuse to be ignored by those who will not listen. We deserve to feel safe in our own schools. The time for change is now.
The smallest of words can make the biggest difference.
Join us to experience their passion.
You're not gonna knock us down. We'll get back up again. You may have hurt us, but I promise we'll be stronger. And we're not gonna let you in. We're putting up a fight. You may have brought the dark. Together we will shine a light. Whoa, we will be something special. Whoa, we will shine.
I hope you will join us. Eshet Chayil Mi'imtza. Every Friday, Jews around the planet pay tribute to the women in their lives, women of valor. Give her the fruit of her hand, the passage reads, and she will be praised at the gates by her very own deeds. Judaism has long honored women, from the prophet Miriam, who helped bring the Jews out of Egypt, to Devorah, who preceded Ruth Bader Ginsburg as a judge by several thousand years. And let's not forget Emma Goldman, Golda Meir, Hannah Senesh, Ariana Zolt, and Frank, to name just a few. This semester, the Streicker Center is proud to shine a spotlight on other women whose names belong on any list. This Thursday, Deborah Lipstadt will be with us to discuss her newest book, Anti-Semitism, Here and Now. On March 10th, we will go off-Broadway with Gloria Steinem, a woman who changed the course of history, to watch a play about her life's work. On March 12th, we will go behind the scenes at the UN with former Ambassador Nikki Haley. On April 2nd, we will join by Valerie Jarrett, who spent 8 years as President Obama's side as his advisor and first friend. We hope. And on May 29th, we will learn about desire, both modern and ancient, from the world's most prominent female Torah scholar, Aviva Zonberg, who has become an international superstar. We hope that you will join us to learn more and celebrate all of them. Tonight, we explore the deeds of Maria Altmann, an Austrian woman who escaped Vienna after the Nazis took over, found refuge in California, and 60 years later struck a stunning blow for justice and remembrance. To discuss her heroic journey, we are honored that Dame Helen Mirren joined us tonight. For a conversation with our good friend Ido Aharoni, who served 25 years in Israel's Foreign Service, including 6 years as Consul General in New York, and now is a distinguished professor at New York University. I would like to thank Ido for organizing tonight's event and for being such an important part of the Streicker Center. 2 quick announcements. On your way out tonight, our library has set up as a mini bookstore of recent titles to do with anti-Semitism. We encourage you to take a look. And also, if you did notice, outside we have our first ever Instagram post corner. There is a replica of the painting. You can tell everybody you went to see the painting. So please take a picture. Tonight is the last night it's going to be there. Ladies and gentlemen, again, thank you so much for coming tonight. And please welcome our friend Ido Aharoni.
Thank you so much, Gadi, for this very kind introduction and for your ongoing partnership. It is a pleasure to be here, and yet again, another meaningful event. We've done several events together. I'm very happy that our previous guest is also here with us, and I'd like to acknowledge the presence of my dear friend, artist Edwina Sands. Edwina, if you can stand up, please. Edwina is a great artist in her own right, but she's also the granddaughter of Winston Churchill. And she was gracious enough a few months ago to spend an evening here with us, something that she never did before, specifically to discuss her great grandfather. Her grandfather, who was one of the greatest statesmen in history. So thank you, Edwina, for being here. This evening is about Dame Helen Mirren's life and work, and particularly about her profoundly important role as the late Maria Altmann in Woman in Gold. This movie is to art restitution awareness what Schindler's List was to Holocaust awareness. It really changed the way people understand the problem of Nazi art theft between 1933 and 1945. Nazi Germany led a systematic campaign to loot art from Jews. Some of the stolen art was recovered by the Allies in the immediate aftermath of the war. However, approximately 600,000 works of valuable art were not returned to their rightful owners or were never relocated. In the decades following the Holocaust, a concerted international effort was undertaken to identify Nazi plunder that still remains unaccounted for, with the aim of ultimately returning the items to their rightful owners or their families. Only 50,000 works were recovered since 1945. The Nazis amassed hundreds of thousands of pieces of artwork worth billions of dollars and stored them throughout Germany. At the end of World War II, the Allies found plundered artwork in more than 1,000 repositories across Germany and Austria. The recovery of stolen art became better internationally coordinated in 1998 when 39 countries, United States, Israel, and Canada among them, signed a joint pledge to identify art stolen from Holocaust victims and to compensate their families. Portrait of Adele Bloch-Bauer I is the official name of one of the most famous paintings in history, also known as the Woman in Gold. The painting was created by Austrian symbolist painter Gustav Klimt between 1903 to 1907. It was commissioned by the sitter's husband, Ferdinand Bloch-Bauer, a wealthy Jewish banker and sugar producer. It was stolen by the Nazis in 1941 and displayed at the Gallery Belvedere. In 1998, Hubertus Czernin, Austrian investigative journalist, established that the Gallery Belvedere contained several works stolen from Jewish owners during the war, and that the gallery had refused to return the art or even acknowledge that a theft is the case. They were refusing even to acknowledge the fact that the art was stolen. One of Ferdinand's nieces, Maria Altmann, who came as a Holocaust survivor to Los Angeles in 1945, hired a young lawyer in Los Angeles by the name of E. Randall Schonberg to make a claim against the gallery for the return of 5 works by Klimt. After a 7-year legal claim, which included a hearing in front of the Supreme Court of the United States, an arbitration committee in Vienna agreed that the painting and others had been stolen from the family and that it should be returned to Altmann. In 2006, following years of legal and public affair efforts by the Bloch-Bauer family, the painting was returned to them. It was sold the same year for $135 million, at the time a record price for a painting, to art collector Ronald Lauder, who placed the work in the Neue Gallery here in New York. The film, Woman in Gold, released in 2015, tells the story of Maria Altmann's escape from Austria and the repossession of Adele Bloch-Bauer's portrait. Maria Altmann herself died in 2011. Before we begin with the program, we have a rare chance to hear more about the uniqueness and history of Klimt's Woman in Gold from a world-class expert. I would like to invite Mr. Scott Gutterman, the Deputy Director and Chief Operating Officer of the Neue Gallery here in New York. He is responsible for the daily operations of the museum and deeply involved in every aspect of the organization's development. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Scott Gutterman.
Thank you very much. As you heard, I'm Scott Gutterman. I'm the Deputy Director at the Neue Gallery. I've been there since we opened in 2001, and it's a great honor to be here representing the museum. As I'm sure most of you know, the Neue Gallery is a museum dedicated to German and Austrian art of the early 20th century. It's also a special privilege for me to be here because my son was made a bar mitzvah at this very temple. The Neue Gallery was founded by 2 friends who worked together for more than 30 years. The American collector, philanthropist, and businessman Ronald Lauder, and his close friend, the late Austrian-born art dealer Serge Sabarsky. I'm sure you all know the Café Sabarsky. The museum contains treasures by a great many artists, including Max Beckmann, Ernst Ludwig Kirchner, Oskar Kokoschka, Egon Schiele, and many others. But the star attraction is without a doubt a masterpiece by Gustav Klimt. When it was exhibited by the Nazis in Vienna in 1941, they called the painting Woman in Gold to conceal the Jewish identity of its subject. But, as you know, the proper name is Portrait of Adele Bloch-Bauer I. And this extraordinary work was acquired by the Neue Gallery in 2006 after it was restituted to the heirs of Maria Altmann. I know I'm repeating some of this, who was Adele Bloch-Bauer's niece, following a lengthy court battle that went all the way to the Supreme Court. And that fight for justice is at the heart of this film directed by Simon Curtis and called Woman in Gold, and the subject of tonight's event. I'm pleased to say that this film has brought literally tens of thousands of visitors to the Neue Gallery. And just as important, it has dramatized the issue of art restitution in a way that makes its importance clear to viewers. At its heart is a magnificent performance by Dame Helen Mirren, as well as a very moving evocation of Vienna at the time of Klimt and his peers. And through these touchstones, we understand that this is a true story of our time. We come to feel a connection to the events that were set in motion, and we see how such powerful emotion can come to reside in a work of art. Thank you.
That was quick. I expected it to be longer. Before we continue, we have another very distinguished guest here. There are many very distinguished people in the room, no doubt about it, but there's one person who is distinguished because of his relevance to the subject matter, and I would like to acknowledge the presence of John S. Friedman. Where is John? Where are you? John, please stand up. John is a journalist and a documentary filmmaker who produced the Academy Award-winning documentary Hotel Terminus, The Life and Times of Klaus Barbie. And I want to tell you that right now, John is working on yet another phenomenal documentary titled Restitution, Art and Memory. And Dame Helen Mirren actually was interviewed by him for this documentary, which is still under production. And so we wish you much success with the new documentary, especially when you have Dame Helen Mirren as part of it. And I also would like to acknowledge the presence of your executive producer, my dear friend, Dr. David Milch, who's sitting right there. Please stand up, David, and be acknowledged. Those of you who don't know, David Milch, Dr. David Milch, not to be confused with his cousin, the other David Milch, who's also a movie producer. David Milch is a philanthropist who supports the arts wholeheartedly, and he financed and funded several feature films that tell the story of his own family during the Holocaust and other Holocaust-related stories, and he's playing a very important role in Holocaust remembrance and the arts. Thank you, David, for everything that you've done. Helen Mirren began her acting career with the Royal Shakespeare Company in 1967 and is one of the few performers who have achieved the Triple Crown of acting, if you know what it means. I'll tell you what it means. She won the Academy Award for Best Actress in 2007 for her performance in The Queen. She received the Olivier Award for Best Actress and the Tony Award for Best Actress in a Play for the same role she played in The Audience. That's quite impressive. She was nominated for Academy Awards for her work in The Madness of King George, 1994, Gosford Park, 2001, and The Last Station, 2009. She is also the winner of 3 consecutive BAFTA Awards for Best Actress, 4 Emmy Awards, and 3 Golden Globe Awards. Altogether, she won no less than 26 film, television, and theater awards throughout her career. That's pretty amazing. Dame Helen Mirren's connection to Israel is long-standing and started in the 1960s. In 2016, she hosted the Genesis Award ceremony in Jerusalem and bestowed an honor upon the great Israeli-American musician Itzhak Perlman. Before I call on her to join me on stage, I'd like to share with you a short clip from the movie A Woman in Gold, where Maria Altmann makes up her mind to pursue the legal battle to obtain the painting. It's a very short clip, less than 2 minutes. Your attention to the screen, please.
Ich sehe dich, Maria. Komm her. Möchtest du deiner Tante helfen? Machst du mir die Kette zu? Deine kleinen Finger sind gerade richtig dafür. Bald wirst du aufhören müssen, so schüchtern zu sein. Das Leben verlangt viel von uns. Dein einziger Feind ist die Angst.
Hello.
I know it's the middle of the night, but if I wait until the morning, I might change my mind. I have decided to face the ghosts.
She's complicated.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the great Dame Helen Mirren.
Thank you very much.
Well, it's good to see you. I know for sure that this time you did not take the train. But I have to tell you, last time we met, Dame Helen Mirren came to my apartment for breakfast, and I asked her, how did you get here? And she said, I took the subway.
I love the subway, don't you? I mean, it gets you there. It's fantastic. And the other thing I love about New York, and indeed the subway, is because the subway is such an equalizer, isn't it? You're all in the same boat or on the same train. But it doesn't matter how wealthy you are, sitting in great luxury in the back of a car in a traffic jam, late. So I much prefer to be on the subway and see people and just get around New York the way the New Yorkers
Now, people
do.
must recognize you.
A little bit, yes, they do, but not necessarily. And if they do, they're very nice, they're absolutely lovely. So, nothing wrong with that.
Well, we have a lot of people in this room that recognize you for sure. So let's talk a little bit about the early years of your career. And I would like to start with your permission. Tell us a little bit about the moment when you discovered that acting is your destiny, that this is what you want to do in life.
Well, it did happen like that, actually. I grew up in a pretty economically, I guess you could say, deprived situation. My father was born in Russia. He came to England when he was about 2 years old. Not Jewish, but my grandfather was actually in the Tsarist army. But he came, and then my family got cut off by the revolution. So I am the sort of first generation of really an immigrant father, at least. And I can't remember why I started talking about that. Oh, yes, so anyway... it was a weird family background because it was sort of intellectual. My father was an intellectual. My mother was working class, very British London working class. So it was that was an interesting mix of my mother left school when she was 14. My dad had an education. So it was already an interesting mix. My father was... in his youth, was a communist, basically. He was certainly very socialist. I don't know if he ever actually joined the Communist Party, but he certainly was one of the British Londoners who demonstrated against the Oswald Mosley marches in the East End before the Second World War. I don't know if any of you are aware of that particular little glitch in British history, but there was a Nazi called Oswald Mosley who was very pro-Hitler, and he led a march through the Jewish part of London. East London at that time was very Jewish, And my father was one of the people who went to demonstrate against the Mosley March. So he was basically a communist, but, you know, he was a taxi driver, ultimately, although he came from a sort of quasi-aristocratic Russian family. Like my grandfather, he became a taxi driver in London. And so it was a weird family background that was intellectual, but financially, economically struggling, you know.
And no connection to entertainment whatsoever?
No, none whatsoever. My Auntie Olga was a chorus girl in London during the Second World War. So, you know, that's about the closest we get to showbiz. And my father was a musician. That's what he wanted to be, was a viola player. But finance and families and everything, and the war interfered with that. So anyway, long story short, we didn't have the money. We had no television. We never went to the cinema. We certainly never went to the theater. So I wasn't exposed to drama and entertainment, really, particularly. But one day my mum decided to take me to the local theatre where there was an amateur production of Hamlet being performed by the South End Shakespeare Society. And I was the perfect age to see Hamlet in particular, Shakespeare maybe in general. I was about 13 or 14. It's a great age to be exposed to Shakespeare. And I was absolutely blown away by this. I was transformed. It excited me beyond, I just couldn't express my excitement about it. And I left that theatre, probably a terrible production. You know, South End Shakespeare Society, it's not going to be a great production, is it? You know, it wasn't the Royal Shakespeare Company. But it was Avi. You're needed. Avi. Yes, from that moment on, it wasn't that I wanted to be, yes, I guess I did want to be an actress, but I wanted to be in that world of poetry and grand ideas and huge passions and fantastic stories and drama.
And you ended up, you know, becoming a teacher.
My parents, you know, thought it was ridiculous to become an actress. You know, they'd been through the Great Depression, they'd been through the Second World War. Coming out of the Second World War, I was one of the beneficiaries of the new kind of welfare state socialism, and I had an education. I didn't have to leave school at 14 like my mum had to. Sorry, where were we? Sorry, this happens to be all the time.
So the question was that you became a teacher at one point.
Oh, yes, I became a teacher, that's right. Yes, because obviously my parents thought it was... I said I wanted to become an actress. They said, don't be ridiculous, that's an absolutely stupid idea. So they said, well, train as a teacher and then see, you know, what you want to do after that. So I trained as a teacher, and I put my teacher's diploma in the bottom of the wardrobe and never looked at it again and became an actress.
But I have to say, I watched your masterclass online, and not only that you're a very gifted actress, but you're also a very gifted teacher.
That's interesting. I was a terrible teacher in school, in classes, with kids. I was awful. But maybe when there's no one to answer back, it's easier.
Is there something that, you know, teaching prepared you to acting? Is there a correlation there?
Well, my sister, who was a teacher, was a teacher her whole life, would say absolutely. She would say her performances were more challenging than mine ever were, because, and she's right, you know, every time, you know, 5 hours a week, or however, she had to walk into a classroom and take control of it and give a lesson, give a performance that had a beginning, middle, and end. So I would sort of concur with her, actually, on that level. But I was not a good teacher. My sister was a good teacher.
Was there an acting mentor for you, someone that you consider to be your mentor?
There was a very wonderful English actor called Ian Richardson. I don't know how many of you are, you know, the original House of Cards, for example, was Ian Richardson's work. And when I joined the Royal Shakespeare Company, I sort of, you know, I leapt very quickly in my career into very sort of high-level theatre. After I worked for 6 months, I was a professional for 6 months before I joined the Royal Shakespeare Company, and then I stayed with them for the next 4 or 5 years. So, you know, I was like in at the deep end, really. Yes, in at the deep end.
You often talk about the building blocks of our lives, things that are transformational, formative, defining, and you referred in one of the interviews that I saw to your early experience in Israel in 1967 as one of the building blocks of your life. If you can elaborate a little bit about that. What brought you to Israel, and tell us about that experience?
Well, you know, I had a Jewish boyfriend. Oh. That always helps. It was shortly after I joined the Royal Shakespeare Company. He was with the Royal Shakespeare Company as well, and we sort of hooked up, if you like. And he was a very important person in my life. I was with him for about 4 years, but he taught me a great deal, and I'm very grateful to him. His family were from Manchester in northern England, and I'll never forget him taking me to visit his family for the first time. But anyway, Peter Brook, we both joined Peter Brook's group and traveled through Africa doing experimental work. And then we were in Paris, we were here in America with this experimental theatre group. And then after we'd finished all of that, that was a year's work, Bruce very much wanted to go to Israel. It was only about 6 months after the Six-Day War. So we're talking about 68, 67? Yes. So it was literally 6 days, 6 months after the Six-Day War. And at that time, the kibbutzes were still, you know, up and running and working. And we joined, and we thought it would be just a great adventure to go and work on a kibbutz for 2 weeks or a month, and then travel around Israel. And it was a wonderful time to see Israel because it was obviously not nearly as developed as it is now. It was raw, and that wonderful, noble history of kibbutz and kibbutzniks was still very much alive. So we spent we were only there 2 weeks actually because Bruce really wanted to travel. I was very happy on the kibbutz. We were, as they said, tourists. You were called tourists. They had a system where foreigners could come and work. You worked with the kibbutznik, and it was a kibbutz called Ha'on, which was
by the Sea of Galilee.
Yes, very, very near the Jordanian Heights, and I worked picking grapes. No, not picking grapes, combing grapes. Did you know we had to comb grapes? Did you have any idea? Well, you have this huge plastic comb, and you literally comb the grapes because you want less grapes on the bunch, so the ones that are there get bigger, so they're for dessert, for the dessert table as opposed to for wine or something. So you literally go and comb the grapes. So I was out there combing the grapes, and just me and one kibbutz boy from the kibbutz, and he had a walkie-talkie. I didn't speak Hebrew. And I could hear a lot of sort of shouting going on down the walkie-talkie. Did I tell you this story before?
Yes, you did.
This story. There's a lot of, but I'm out there, I'm combing. There's just me and him, and I'm just combing away, like row after row after row. And I keep hearing, and I sort of look up, and there are these little puffs of white smoke, on the hills, because we're right up against the, the Jordanian hills, the Golan Heights, exactly. And I started shouting on the walkie-talkie, and eventually it's time to go home. You start work at 5 in the morning, 4 in the morning, and you work till about 12 or 1 in the afternoon because it gets too hot. So that's your day. So eventually the day was over and we went home back to the kibbutz to find out that the whole of the rest of the kibbutz had been down in the bomb shelter all day long because we were being bombed by the Jordanians. Only they were like miles away. I was like right there. And the young boy, was very, gung-ho about defending Israel and said, no, I'm not going down there. I'm doing my job out here. I refuse to be intimidated. So they were very cross with him. But anyway, Israel was an amazing experience, absolutely amazing. Then after the kibbutz, we traveled around, we hitchhiked everywhere, and it was very revelatory, it was very emotional, and it was wonderful. And my friend Bruce, who had never ever eaten bacon, saw Israelis eating bacon. So he thought, well, blow that, I'm going to start eating bacon now. But it was an extra. I'd never been anywhere like that before. And I'd been to some amazing places because we traveled through Africa by then, but it was very, very moving.
And then over the years, you had a chance to visit Israel again and see how the country has changed. And last time you were there in 2016 for the Genesis Awards.
Yes, absolutely, yes.
Bestowing the award on Itzhak Perlman.
Yes, that was a wonderful experience. And to see Jerusalem, the way it's developed since I was there. And I thought a rather remarkable mayor of Jerusalem. I was very impressed by him. But obviously, history is hard. History takes a long time to work itself out.
Which is a nice segue to Women in Gold.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Tell us a little bit about the first time you became aware of the project. Who brought it to your attention and when was it?
Yes, my agent brought it to me. He was very... He was a big supporter of the project. He really wanted me to do it, and of course, once I read it, as soon as I read it, I could see why. It was a very, very extraordinary story. I always say, truth is better than fiction, and in this case, as usual, truth was better than fiction. It was an amazing story that I wasn't aware of. I had seen the painting in Vienna. My husband and I had visited Vienna, 20 years ago or something, and had seen that painting hanging in the museum. But for some reason, the story I'd missed the story, and so it was a great story to become aware of.
Can you share with us a little bit about the research that you did for the role and how you prepared to play Maria Altmann?
Well, my dentist, no, not my dentist, my heart doctor in Los Angeles, his mother was exactly from Maria's background, from that sort of very upper class Viennese, very elegant, very educated, very cultural background, and he sent me a tape of her talking, and she was very, very, she didn't look like Maria, but her whole style was like Maria. And also, luckily, there was quite a lot of film of Maria, although sadly she'd passed away by the time I got to do the film. there was a film of her, there was a long, long deposition where she didn't speak, but she listened and she watched, and very occasionally she spoke. And that film was everything to me, because the way she looked when she looked, and the way she spoke, you know, she was very powerful, Maria Altmann, in this very elegant, laid back, polite, I wouldn't say not aggressive way, but just with incredible class. That's the only word I can use, is class, really. And the way she listened with such, and this deposition, these lawyers are just so horrible, so, oh, you want to scream at them.
By the way, tonight we have no lawyers in the room.
Yes, well, the lawyers, you know, in the deposition, they were doing their job, but they was just, they were so horrible and annoying and insulting and dreadful. And she was just listening with this look of utter sort of disdain on her face, but elegant disdain. It's really wonderful. And when she spoke, it came, it was elegant and unemotional and direct, but it came from so far back. You know, it came emotionally and from so far back. It kind of upsets me to talk about it, honestly, because to play Maria, you know, obviously you had to go into Maria's memory. And I had to carry her memory with me, as so many of you do, carry the memories of your, if not your memories, the memories of your parents or your grandparents. And it's so important to keep those memories absolutely burning and alive, I think. So that was the best I could do for Maria, really, was to try and keep that history and that memory absolutely burning and absolutely alive in my mind every second of the film. Whether you see it on the screen or not was immaterial to me in a way. It was just that the reality, the absolute reality of what her life then had been, what she saw, what she experienced, was very important.
What would you say was the most challenging part of playing Maria Altmann for you?
I think that. I think
the combination
just that.
Of this vulnerability.
I mean, I had to revisit, you know, the books and the photographs and the stories of that darkest of the most horrible, dreadful, dreadful times. I visited Buchenwald as a part of my research. I happened to be making a film in that part of Germany, another film. I knew I was going to do Maria, so I went to Buchenwald. Just to bring all of that right back into the present, right back in front of your face, and not say, no, it's in the past. No, it's here. It's right here. It's in the present. It's in front of us. And I think we still have to make that effort constantly. That's my feeling very strongly.
Well, with your permission, we'd like to play a little clip from the movie, which is the part where Maria wins the arbitration and her final conversation with the Austrian bureaucrat that she had to deal with. So if we can show that clip from the movie. Is there anybody out there?
Is there anybody up there? There is some. He's working the machinery. Ah, here we go.
We, the arbitrators, have now studied both sides of this complex case. Trying to keep an open mind as we examine the evidence, we have reached our final verdict. Our decision today is that the portrait of Adela Bloch-Bauer and the other Klimt paintings in question should be returned to her niece.
First time in a long while. I'm proud to call myself an Austrian.
Oh, you should be.
It's almost press time. How do I look?
Sexy and victorious.
Oh, yeah?
How do I look?
You look sexy and victorious.
Miss Altmann, may I have a word?
Yes, of course.
I'm defeated. But I will ask you, beg you, entreat you, not to let these paintings leave their motherland. Let us come to an arrangement. I'm sure we can make a generous offer.
I too am sad that they will not stay in Adela's country. But all along, I have tried to negotiate, I have tried to keep the dialogue open, and all along you have thwarted me and closed the doors in my face. So now, I am tired. And my aunt will cross the Atlantic to make her home in America, as I once had to.
Goodbye, Mrs. Altmann.
You know, I don't interview great actors for a living, but I do know that sometimes actors have a problem seeing themselves on the big screen. How about you? Are you okay?
In general, I don't like to watch, no, honestly. But it was nice to see Maria again there for a minute. I haven't seen her for a little while.
I'm sure you received many reactions after the movie came out. That's when I met you. I met you at the Neue Gallery, 2015, after the movie came out, at the premiere, the night the movie premiered. And we had a lovely conversation about how meaningful this is for the cause. Not just art restitution, but I think Holocaust awareness in general. So if you could share with us some of the responses, memorable responses that you received after the movie came out.
Well, the most amazing thing was I very shortly after the film came out, or maybe while the film was out, I was doing a play on Broadway. I was doing the audience on Broadway. And as I'm sure you know, a lot of the audience for theatre is Jewish. And every night when I came out of the stage door, every night there would be people who had seen the film and wanted to say, that was my story, that was my grandmother's story, that was my aunt's story, that was... it was extraordinary. So many people here in New York in particular really, really identified with that film. Because it is their story. It's their story, it's their history. And that was an extraordinary experience for me. And I'm very grateful. I'm just grateful to have had the opportunity to be in the film, quite honestly. It's me that's grateful, to the filmmakers, to Maria, obviously in particular, and indeed to the people who fight for Rod Launder, who's a great advocate, a continuing great advocate, great warrior for the restitution, the continuing effort to. I can't believe that it's still a battle, but it is still a battle for people's property to be returned to them.
Before you join me on stage, I acknowledge the presence of John Friedman here in the audience, who's now making a movie. You were interviewed for that movie called Art, Restitution, and Memory. Restitution, Art and Memory. He's right there, wave, so that
Where
we can
are
see you.
Yes.
So you're also a big part of keeping this issue alive, and we'd like to thank you for that on behalf of the entire community.
Well, yes, it's
And
just
the fact that you're doing this, and I want you to know that Dame Helen Mirren is here pro bono as a service to the community. And she's doing this tonight as a friend of the community. And I think that there are several people here in the audience that would like to ask questions, if you don't mind.
No, I'd love that. That would be
We
great.
would
Yes.
like to... yes, I guess everything is clear and everybody wants to go home.
I know. Well, it's always at the beginning.
we
it's
have-
always
we have
big,
people,
difficult.
yeah.
There's someone right up there at the back there, actually. Oh, there's one. Yeah, two ladies there.
Hi.
Hi.
I didn't plan on asking a question, but I'm an actor and I'm so in awe of you. And I guess I just wanted to ask, when you get a script, do you have kind of a process of your way in? Like, are you a method actor, or what's your way in?
I'm so not a method actor. I do the most. None of you are allowed to tell anyone this. Maybe I'll say it in my lesson. I don't know. I do the most awful thing. I look at the last page first, before anything, and see if my character's on the last page. And if it's on the last page, that's a good sign. If it's not on the last page, I look backwards through the story to see the last time the character does appear. And if the character leaves with a bang, some fabulous scene, I go, okay, that's okay, I'll go and read it from the beginning now. But if the character just sort of disappears, there's no explanation, I don't go back to read it from the beginning. It's not worth it. It's not a good enough role. But once I've done that, now I've gone back to the beginning and I read it. It's funny. If I find myself as I'm reading it, sort of starting to say it aloud, starting to feel it in my mouth, starting to work it, that's always a sign that I'm interested. And it's not something I sort of intellectually work out, but if viscerally I just start, wanting to say the lines, that's a good sign. But that's only the very beginning, and then there are sort of many stages from there onwards of sometimes wrestling with a script, sometimes fighting it, sometimes it just washes over you and it relaxes upon you in a way that you just feel one with it, So there's, different things can happen.
We have a question right here.
Yes, thank you. You were talking about your life, Helen, growing up in impoverished circumstances, your family coming down in circumstance, and I was thinking about that and Maria's arc, the arc of Maria's life, and I was wondering what you drew upon from in your own self, in your own history, to play her so beautifully.
Yes, I mean, I think, it's... my family in Russia had estates and property and what's not presence, that's not the right word, but they had an identity. And the revolution and the Second World War just wiped it away. It was gone. So my father's attitude was, forget that. Just forget it. It's gone. There's nothing you can do about it. Everything that you think was so solid, so entrenched, so couldn't be destroyed. Yes, it can all be destroyed very quickly. And you have to have the strength to carry on. And your community know this above all communities. There are many other communities, as we speak, being created who have to know that. We think of the Iraqis or the Syrians, even the Venezuelans, you know, facing these problems. So my father taught me that you just have to forget all that and drive forward. And I think that I did use that in a sense in my understanding of Maria. And that sense that, as she says in the film, you don't understand, we couldn't. You say, why have you waited so long to deal with this? We couldn't deal with it in the first 10, 20, 30, 40 years. It was just not psychologically possible. You know, you had to, as far as I can make out, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but you had to just fight your way out of it, away from it, and go forward. Only way to survive, psychologically, let alone physically, economically, and everything. And certainly that was what my dad's attitude. You know, he changed our name. We were Mirrenov. We became Mirren. Assimilation was everything. And forget the fact that we owned, you know, vast tracts of Russia. Well, not so vast, but, you know, large pieces of Russia. You know, forget it. It's gone. So, yes, I did identify. At least in a part of my brain, I could understand that as far as Maria was concerned. It wasn't completely alien to me, you know. Yeah.
I'm right here. Hi. Yes. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I'm sure that most of you know about the BDS movement that is really against Israel, boycott, dive, and sanction. And you as an artist, I have a twofold question to you regarding the cultural BDS, which is attacking Israeli art, Israeli artists, and international artists who go to Israel. So first part of my question is like, what do you think about the cultural boycott? Is it a legit call to boycott Israeli artists or anything related to Israel? And second of all, what would be your message for those artists who are being pressured by these BDS boycotters to actually not to go to Israel or not to host Israeli artists? Thank you very much.
I don't agree with the cultural boycott at all. You know, when the times that I've been to Israel, I'm so inspired and excited by the artists of Israel, by their approach to the difficulties that Israel is experiencing, their approach to Palestine, their approach to the whole terrible conflict, war, whatever you want to call it, historical problems. The artists are so important. To me, the artists are the most important, much more important than the politicians, as far as I'm concerned. So, why boycott the artists? You know, no. Artistic exchange is so important and so benign, actually. No, I mean, of course it can be radical, and it should be radical. I like, you know, absolutely, it should be radical. But it's a beautiful human way of exchanging thoughts and ideas and political ideas and spiritual ideas. It's so important. So to me, no, the cultural change is the most important. That's my feeling.
Thank you. One of my favorite Shakespearean plays, one of my favorite characters is Prospero. So I wanted to ask how it was like playing, you know, the gender opposite Prospera, and working with Julie Taymor. What was your process in that film and making it your own and making it relevant in the new sort of frame?
Thank you so much for that question. I loved playing Prospera. I never thought, you know, now it's so radically changed, and it's changed so quickly, hasn't it? The whole concept of, you have Glenda Jackson about to come and play King Lear. You know, I mean, 10 years ago, that was absolutely an impossible thought. Even maybe 5 years ago. And so when I did Prospero, it was still pretty radical for a woman to play these male roles. I didn't play it as a man, I played it absolutely as a woman, because I think that I remember watching a production of The Tempest, and as I was watching it, I was thinking, my goodness, a woman could play this. You'd hardly have to change any of the dialogue. A little bit of the backstory, rather than the Duke, she's a duchess, but very little. All of the rest of the dialogue is absolutely, fine for a woman to speak. But you see, when I was a younger actress in Shakespeare, the thought of women playing Hamlet or Lear or Prospero was just ridiculous, So you had a very limited access to roles in Shakespeare, but I would watch my fellow actors playing Hamlet from the wings and just think, oh, if only I could have those words in my mouth. If only I could have that thought in my head. Because that's the thing about Shakespeare. It's not just the words in your mouth. It's having to think the thoughts that make the words happen. And those thoughts are so profound and so beautiful. And they're almost more profound when they're in your mind and you're having to think them as you speak them than they are as the audience sitting, listening to them and thinking about them. So I was always profoundly jealous of my fellow male actors who had the opportunity to play these great, great male roles. So it was a wonderful experience to play. Julie Taymor is obviously an incredible visual artist. She's also an absolute hair Nazi. I hope she'll forgive me for saying this. I have told her myself. But I'd be in the middle of an incredibly profound speech, thinking these deeply profound thoughts. And she'd say, cut, your hair, there's a bit sticking up. It doesn't work. I'd be like, I'm in the middle of serious Shakespeare here. What do you mean my hair? Anyway, it was a great experience.
Well, I think we'll take one last question here from my dear friend David Milch.
Thank you, Dame Helen Mirren, for being here tonight and for participating in our film, John, in the interview you did with us. Earlier today, at Ido's invitation, I was with Lord John Mendelsohn from the House of Lords in Great Britain, and he spoke to a small group about the recent rise of anti-Semitism in Great Britain, related
and all over Europe. Yes, absolutely.
Exactly so, and particularly the Labour Party and the resignation recently of a number of members of the Labour Party. And if you have any comments to share with us, your observations on what's going on there, and any thoughts on what some of us or yourself or fellow artists can do about it.
Well, it's very, oh God, it's so upsetting because, the Labour Party, the left-wing party, if you like, the Socialist Party, is the party where really, as I said, my dad, socialist, Labour supporter, communist even, fighting Oswald Mosley in the East End before the Second World War, the left is not where we really not where we expect to find anti-Semitism, and to find it either rising or lurking or hidden. It took me completely by surprise, that particular story, I have to say. I just thought, not in the Labour Party, sure, it's the one place, surely, that we're not going to find that. But all political parties are in a flux, constantly in a state of flux and change, and nothing ever stays the same. And It's deeply, deeply worrying. Absolutely. I don't know the intricate details of it, quite honestly. So I don't want to say things out of ignorance. But all I can say is that yes, I find that profoundly worrying. But also the desecration of graves in France. I saw a photo recently, I think, of Macron walking through a graveyard that had been desecrated. You know, it's devastating, and I think that's why, as I said earlier, I think that it's so important, and especially now we're losing the generation who have a eyewitness. We're losing that generation. They're almost gone. And thank God for Steven Spielberg, who did such incredibly important work in recording people while they were still with us, to have that that witness, that testimony for the rest of our lives and for the future. That testimony is so incredibly important. We have to keep those. It's painful. It's dreadfully painful to have to go back and say this happened. It's so painful. And you want to say, like my dad, you know, no, let's just go on. But you have to revisit it. You have to say, this happened. This happened. And bring it up again and again and again. And I think we're all responsible for that as long as we're alive, you know, because it's always there, isn't it? Mm.
Thank you so much. I guess I will ask the last question, very, very short question. What's next, work-wise, for you?
Well, I've just done someone who wasn't very nice to the Jewish community, played Catherine the Great of Russia. Oh dear. But you know, but a great character, and you know, certainly an interesting woman in terms of extremely powerful and successful women. You know, an extraordinary role. So I've just done that for HBO. And then I did a film with Sir Ian McKellen called The Good Liar, and that's a fun one. Go and see that. That'll be fun. Yes.
Well, thank you so much.
And serious, yes.
I think I'll be speaking on behalf. I think I'll be speaking on behalf of every person in this great room, that tonight you enriched our lives with your wisdom, with your candor, with your passion, and we are grateful. Thank you for being here. Ladies and gentlemen,
thank you very much,
Dame
everyone.
Helen Mirren.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming. Good night.